There are people who spend their entire lives trying to prove they're capable. They shape choices to impress, adjust behaviors to be accepted, and little by little lose touch with who they really are. They fear being seen as insufficient. They seek validation in achievements that never seem enough. But what if everything they were taught about needing external approval was exactly what prevents them from having real confidence? What if the key to true confidence wasn't in achieving more, but in stopping the search for validation outside? Jung understood this paradox. He knew that those who seek in others what they can only find within themselves are condemned never to arrive. You think confidence is something you lose, as if at some point in life it was there solid and then simply disappeared. But what if it was never yours to begin with? What if what you call lack of confidence is actually the absence of something that should have been built within you, but was outsourced to others' eyes? There's a silent belief that governs the life of those who grew up without validation. It's not a belief you chose. It was absorbed, internalized without words, without warning. The belief is this: confidence is something others give you. It comes through approval, recognition, acceptance. When someone tells you you're capable, you feel capable. When someone praises you, you feel valuable. When someone chooses you, you feel real. And so you build an entire life around this invisible logic. You work harder to be noticed. You adjust who you are to be accepted. You achieve goals to prove you deserve the space you occupy. Each victory brings temporary relief. Each recognition calms the anxiety for a few days. But the feeling of being enough never lasts. Because what you built wasn't confidence. It was dependence. Dependence on external validation, on the approving gaze, on constant confirmation that you're doing well, that you matter, that you have value. And when that confirmation doesn't come, or when it's delayed, something inside you starts to crack. You question everything. Did I choose wrong? Am I not good enough? Was I never? But the problem isn't in the answer. The problem is in the question. Because when you need others to tell you who you are, you've handed them control over your existence. You're not building confidence. You're begging for certainty. Jung observed this repeatedly over decades, working with people who seemed successful on the outside, but empty inside. People who had everything they said they wanted, but still felt fragile. He realized the problem wasn't lack of achievement. It was lack of internal roots. These people built entire identities on others' perception. And when perception changed, or when no one was watching, they simply collapsed. Because confidence built through external validation is like a house erected on sand. While the weather is calm, it seems solid. But when the storm comes, when approval stops, when recognition disappears, there's no foundation, nothing to hold it up. And you feel this. You feel the emptiness no achievement fills. You feel the fragility no praise resolves. Because deep down, you know you're performing. You know the version of you others approve isn't the version you recognize when you're alone. And this distance between who you are and who you need to appear to be, that distance is where confidence dies. So you try harder, work more, achieve more, adjust more, because if last time wasn't enough, maybe next time will be. Maybe if you impress enough, you'll finally feel you deserve to be here. But the next time never is, because you're not trying to build confidence. You're trying to fill a hole that was dug long ago when you were too small to understand what was happening, when you were a child and realized, without words, that being yourself wasn't enough, that love, attention, and safety came with conditions, that you needed to adjust, mold yourself, be useful, be impressive, be perfect. And in that moment, something inside you learned a lesson never said aloud. You only deserve to exist if approved. That lesson wasn't taught cruelly. Often it wasn't even intentional, but it was absorbed. And decades later, you're still living under its weight, still trying to earn something that should have been given without conditions, still waiting for someone to finally tell you you're enough. And while you wait, life passes, and the confidence you seek in others keeps escaping, because it was never there to begin with. But where was this belief born? There's a specific moment in childhood that shaped everything, and you're still living under its weight. There's an instant in childhood when you realize something you should never have needed to realize. It's not a dramatic scene. There are no screams, no visible abandonment. It's something subtler, quieter. It's the moment you understand without words that being yourself isn't safe. It might have been when you expressed an emotion and were ignored, or when you asked for attention and received impatience, or when you tried to show who you were and realized no one was really looking. Not because they were cruel, but because they were busy, tired, distracted. And in that instant, something inside you drew a conclusion that would shape decades of your life. You're not a priority. The child doesn't understand this rationally. She doesn't think in words, but she feels that love, attention, and safety aren't guaranteed. They need to be conquered, earned, deserved. And so begins the construction of a belief never spoken aloud but engraved in the body. I need to be different from what I am to be accepted. So you learn to adjust, learn to read the environment, to notice what generates approval and what generates indifference. You learn that when you're useful, when you don't bother, when you perform well, things get lighter. And when you don't do this, when you dare to be inconvenient, vulnerable, or simply real, the space around you grows cold. It's not that you were explicitly rejected, it's that you were conditionally accepted. And the child who grows up under conditional acceptance internalizes a cruel logic. She doesn't deserve to exist as she is. She needs to become something else, something more palatable, easier to deal with, more impressive. And this transformation doesn't happen consciously. It happens in silence, in adaptation, in the gradual erasure of parts of yourself that weren't well received. Anger was hidden because anger created distance. Vulnerability was denied because vulnerability was seen as weakness. The desire to be seen was suppressed because asking for attention was inconvenient. And what remained was an edited version of you, a version that worked, that was accepted, but was never whole. This is the origin of most psychological wounds. It's not explicit trauma that destroys, it's absence, the lack of consistent validation, the feeling that you need to become something different to deserve the space you occupy. And when this happens too early, when the child is still forming their identity, they build their very existence around this absence. They don't think I'm valuable and the world hasn't noticed yet. They think I'm not valuable enough and I need to prove I am. And this second belief becomes the foundation of everything, of every choice, of every relationship, of every achievement, because you're not living to express who you are. You're living to compensate for what you believe is lacking in you. And decades later, when you look at your life, you notice a pattern. You always adjust, always perform, always try to prove, even when no one's asking, even when there's no real threat. Because the emotional survival system activated in childhood was never turned off. It keeps running, interpreting every interaction as a test, every silence as rejection, every criticism as confirmation that you're not enough. The person living under these rules decades later isn't being neurotic. She's being faithful to what she learned. She's trying to earn something that should have been given without conditions. And as long as she keeps trying to earn outside what should have been built inside, confidence will remain a mirage, something that seems close but disappears every time you try to touch it. And this version of you built to be accepted. Jung had a name for it, and when you understand what it is, everything starts to make sense. You can spend your entire life never having lived as yourself, not because you were prevented, but because you learned so early that being yourself wasn't safe enough. So you created something else, a version of you that worked better, that generated less conflict, that was more accepted. And over time, this version became so natural, you forgot you were wearing a mask. You began to believe that was you, but it's not. It's something you built to survive emotionally, the identity you present to the world, the edited version that learned to navigate life without being rejected. The problem isn't having a mask. The problem is forgetting you're wearing one. When this happens, you stop knowing who you are when no one's watching. The mask was built carefully. Each piece was chosen based on what generated approval. If being useful worked, you became useful. If being quiet avoided conflict, you became quiet. If achieving impressed, you became an achiever. Each adjustment made sense at the time. Each change brought temporary relief, but none of them came from who you really were. They came from who you needed to be to not be ignored. So the mask was built, layer by layer, adjustment by adjustment, until it became so sophisticated, so successful, that you convinced yourself it was identity, not disguise. That's when something dangerous happened. You stopped questioning, stopped checking if what you were doing came from inside or outside, stopped asking if what you called you was really yours or just a conditioned response to fear of rejection. The most socially successful people are often the most distant from themselves. They perfected the mask. They know exactly what to say, how to act, how to impress. And this skill is valued. But beneath it, there's emptiness. A persistent feeling that something's missing. That no matter how much they achieve, no matter how much they're admired, nothing touches the core. The core was forgotten long ago. You feel this when every achievement seems empty, when every compliment sounds false, when you're surrounded by people but feel completely alone. Who they're seeing isn't you, it's the mask. And the mask can be impressive, can be admired, but can't be loved. It's not real. The more you live through it, the further you drift from who you really are. Until one day you look in the mirror and recognize nothing anymore. You know what others expect from you, know how to perform, but no longer know what you want, what you feel, what you think when no one's evaluating. You spent so much time adjusting, molding, editing, that the internal voice was silenced. Most people never remove the mask. Removing the mask means facing something scary. It means confronting the possibility that without the performance, you no longer know who you are. And this uncertainty is terrifying. The mask, even being a prison, is familiar. It's safe. It's what you know. But there's a cost you feel every day, even without being able to name it. It's the weight of never being able to rest, of never being able to just be, of always needing to measure up, because the mask demands constant maintenance, it demands vigilance, and when you live like this long enough, the exhaustion is no longer physical, it's existential. You didn't lose confidence, you lost contact with who you are without needing an audience, and as long as you keep living through an identity built to impress, true confidence will remain inaccessible, because confidence isn't born from approval, it's born from knowing who you are when the spotlight goes out. But what happens when you try to remove the mask? When you try to be yourself without the protection of performance? That's where most people give up. You achieved everything you said you wanted, crossed the obstacles, overcame the difficulties, arrived where you promised you'd arrive, and now standing at the top, looking at everything you built, you feel something you can't explain to anyone, an emptiness, a persistent feeling that something's missing, that none of this matters as much as it should, and you don't understand, because you did everything right, worked when others rested, persisted when others quit, adjusted, improved, performed. So why does victory feel so empty? Why does the recognition you expected sound so false when it finally arrives? Because deep down, you know that all this was built on a fragile foundation. It wasn't built on who you are. It was built on who you needed to appear to be, to not be ignored. And now that you've arrived, you realize you conquered something you never truly wanted. You conquered approval, but lost yourself in the process. External validation works like a drug. The first time you receive praise, recognition, an achievement that makes others look at you differently, something inside you relaxes. You think, finally I'm enough. Finally, I deserve to be here. But the relief doesn't last. In days, sometimes in hours, the feeling returns. The doubt, the insecurity, the need to prove again. So you seek the next achievement, the next recognition, the next validation, and each time, the relief is lasts less. You're not building confidence, you're feeding a system that's never satisfied, a system that always asks for more, always demands the next proof, always questions if the last one was enough. People who seem to have everything carry the same emptiness, the same feeling of living a life that wasn't completely theirs. Every choice was made thinking about how it would be seen. Every victory was measured by others' reaction. And none of this built identity. It only built an image. And the image can be admired, can be respected, but can't be inhabited. It has no substance. It's just reflection. When you live as reflection, when your existence depends on others' gaze to have form, you never rest, can never simply be. Being isn't enough. You need to seem. The cost of this isn't visible. No one sees. On the outside, you're fine. On the outside, you're achieving. But inside, there's a tiredness that doesn't pass with sleep, an exhaustion that has no name. You know you can't stop. If you stop proving, stop performing, maybe they'll notice. Maybe they'll see you're not as capable as you seem. Maybe they'll discover you're just trying not to disappear. And this fear was never about others. It was about you, about what you'll find if you stop running, about who you are when you're not trying to impress, because you spent so much time building the image that you forgot what exists beneath it. and the possibility of finding nothing there is terrifying. So you continue, keep achieving, keep proving, keep adjusting, and each victory brings the same emptiness, because the problem was never lack of achievement, it was lack of connection with who you really are. And as long as you keep seeking in others' eyes the confirmation that you deserve to exist, you'll keep feeling something's missing, because it is. What's missing isn't more recognition, isn't more achievement, isn't more validation. What's missing is you. The version of you that was left behind when you learned being yourself wasn't enough, and as long as this version remains forgotten, no external victory will fill the internal void. But there's a specific moment when this search stops being about achievement and becomes about prison, when you realize you're living to impress people who don't even care. There's an instant when you realize. It's not dramatic. There's no sudden revelation. It's just a common moment, some ordinary situation where something inside you clicks, and you see with frightening clarity, the more you try to prove, the less you exist. It might be during a conversation where you notice you're choosing each word based on how it'll be received, or when you're alone and notice you can't relax because your mind is still reviewing past interactions, checking if you performed well enough, or when you receive a compliment and instead of feeling satisfaction, feel only temporary relief, followed by anxiety about needing to maintain that impression. In this moment you understand, the search for validation is no longer about belonging, no longer about being accepted. It's about psychological survival. You're not trying to impress, you're trying not to disappear. And this discovery changes everything. When external validation becomes necessity, not choice, you stop being free. Every interaction becomes a test. Every silence becomes a threat. Every criticism confirms what you always feared, that without others' approval you have no substance. The more you seek external confirmation, the more you confirm to yourself that you're not enough without it. This is the breaking point. The moment when the person realizes they're trapped in a system they themselves built. A system where their own identity depends on constant validation. The cruelty of this system is that it never satisfies. No matter how much recognition you receive, doubt always returns. Need always returns. The problem isn't in the amount of validation, it's in the dependence on it. You feel this when you need to check how your message was received, when you analyze every reaction to ensure you didn't offend, didn't disappoint, didn't seem inadequate. When you adjust your opinion based on who's in the room, when you measure your words not by what you want to say, but by what will be approved. Each time you do this, each time you place others' perception above your own voice, you erase yourself a little more. The most disturbing part is this doesn't feel wrong in the moment. It feels prudent, feels smart, feels necessary. You convinced yourself you need this approval to function, that without it you have no value, that others' opinion is the thermometer of your reality, but it's not, never was. Others' opinion says more about who's looking than about who's being seen. Each person sees you through their own lenses, their own fears, their own projections. When you give these lenses the power to define who you are, you stop being a person and become a mirror, a reflection that changes depending on who's looking. Mirrors have no identity. They only reflect. You spent so much time reflecting others' expectations, adjusting your image to fit others' projections, that you forgot something exists beneath the reflection. Something that doesn't need external light to have form. But recognizing the prison isn't the same as leaving it. When you try to stop seeking validation, when you try to simply be without performing, something scary happens. You no longer know who you are. The identity you built was so intertwined with others' perception that without it you feel empty, lost, as if you removed the structure and discovered nothing's holding you up inside. This moment is crucial. It's when most people give up. It's when most return to the familiar prison of external validation, because at least there exists a sense of identity, even if false. But there's another path, a path that doesn't require you to build a new mask. It requires you to remove the one you already wear. But what if there was a way to rebuild confidence without depending on anyone? What if the key wasn't in being seen, but in seeing yourself? There's something that contradicts everything we were taught about confidence, that it's not born when you become perfect. It's born when you become whole, and being whole doesn't mean being impressive. It means integrating the parts of you that were rejected, hidden, or denied. The child who grew up without consistent validation quickly learned which parts of her were acceptable and which weren't. Anger needed to be hidden. Vulnerability needed to be denied. The need for attention needed to be suppressed. And what remained was an edited version, a version that worked socially, but an incomplete version. And for years you carried these rejected parts as dead weight, as silent shame, as something that needed to be kept away from others' sight. If someone saw these parts, if someone noticed you also feel anger, also need help, also have fear, maybe the image would crumble, maybe approval would disappear, maybe you'd be rejected. But these rejected parts don't disappear when you hide them. They just operate in the shadows. They influence your choices without you noticing. They sabotage your achievements when you're about to reach them. They create destructive patterns you don't understand. You can't control what you don't recognize. And you can't recognize what you've spent your whole life denying. So rebuilding confidence doesn't begin with more achievements. It begins with less denial. It begins when you stop rejecting the parts of yourself that don't fit the image you built. When you allow them to exist, not for others, for you. This isn't easy, because it means facing what you spent decades hiding. It means recognizing you're also the person who feels envy, who makes mistakes, who's sometimes selfish, who doesn't always know what to do. And recognizing this seems dangerous, seems like an admission of weakness. But it's not. It's the opposite. Strength isn't denying what you feel. It's having the courage to feel it without needing to hide. It's allowing anger to exist without becoming violent. It's recognizing vulnerability without becoming a victim. It's accepting imperfection without becoming mediocre. When you do this, when you stop spending energy rejecting parts of yourself, something changes. You become more solid, more present, less reactive. Confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being complete. And being complete means stopping dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. It means recognizing you contain contradictions, flaws, fears, and that doesn't make you less valuable. It makes you human. Jung observed that people who achieve this integration stop needing external validation the same way. Not because they became arrogant, but because they became whole. They don't need others to tell them who they are, because they already know. Not the idealized version, not the edited version, the real version, with all its contradictions and complexities. And when you know yourself this way, when you see yourself without filters, without masks, without denial, others' opinion stops being a threat, because you're no longer hiding anything. There's nothing others can discover about you that you haven't already recognized yourself. And this internal honesty is what creates unshakable confidence. It's not confidence based on achievement, not confidence based on approval. It's confidence based on self-acceptance. And self-acceptance doesn't mean liking everything about you. It means stopping denying what exists. It means recognizing you're more complex than the image you try to project. And that's okay, because the moment you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you stop needing others to approve them. And when you stop needing approval to exist, something inside you calms down, finally. And it's about this silence that the last chapter speaks. When you stop seeking outside, something inside you calms down. And this calm isn't passivity, it's presence. Real confidence doesn't shout, it rests, doesn't perform, it just exists, and exists in a way that doesn't depend on audience, approval, or recognition. It's there when you're alone, when no one's watching, when there's nothing to prove, when you stop seeking external validation, something inside you finally calms down. It's not that you stop caring about others, it's that you stop needing them to know who you are. The difference is subtle, but changes everything. You can hear criticism without collapsing, can receive praise without clinging to it as proof of worth, can be in a room full of people and not feel the need to adjust who you are. You're no longer living through others' perception. You're living through your own presence. And presence isn't performance, isn't trying to impress, isn't molding behavior to generate approval. It's simply being complete whole, without needing to edit parts of yourself to fit others' expectations. People who reach this state become disturbingly calm. It's not the calm of someone who gave up. It's the calm of someone who finally stopped fighting against themselves. They no longer need to prove anything, not because they're arrogant, but because they know, in a deep and unshakable way, who they are when the spotlight goes out. And this internal certainty doesn't fluctuate with external opinion. The transformation happens when you realize you're no longer reviewing conversations in your head, checking if you performed well enough, When you choose words based on what you want to say, not on what will be approved. When you allow moments of silence to exist without feeling the need to fill them. When you can be seen without needing to be impressive. The most surprising thing is that when you stop trying to be approved, something unexpected happens. People start to respect you differently, not because you changed your behavior to impress them, but because you stop needing them to tell you who you are. And there's something in the presence of someone who doesn't need validation that generates involuntary respect. It's rare. Most are performing. And when you're not, it stands out. But this isn't the goal. The goal was never to be admired. It was to stop needing to be admired to feel real. It was to recover the part of you that was outsourced to others' eyes. It was to bring back inside what should have always been there, the certainty that you exist, regardless of who's looking. When you reach this point, when confidence stops being something you seek and becomes something you simply are, life changes. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but deeply. You stop living in constant evaluation. Stop measuring every interaction as a test of worth. Stop carrying the invisible weight of needing to prove you deserve the space you occupy. In place of this weight, there's lightness. A lightness that doesn't come from having achieved everything. It comes from having stopped needing to achieve to exist. It comes from knowing your presence isn't conditional, that you don't need to be perfect, impressive, or approved to have the right to be here. Most people never reach this, not because it's impossible, but because it's scary. It means giving up the false security that external validation offers. It means facing the possibility of being rejected and realizing you remain whole anyway. It means stopping living for others and starting to live through yourself. But those who make this crossing discover something no one can take away. A confidence that doesn't depend on circumstance. A presence that doesn't fluctuate with approval or criticism. An internal certainty that remains even when everything around changes. You don't recover confidence by proving to others you're capable. You recover confidence by stopping needing to prove. And when you stop needing, when you simply exist without the constant need for validation, something inside you finally rests. And this rest isn't the end. It's the beginning of a life that's yours, not a life built to impress, but a life inhabited by you, finally.